everybody, welcome back. It's Christine again with the Artist Pod, and today we're going to talk about how to add emotion to eyes. So our eyes are very expressive, right? They add a lot of emotion, and through our eyes alone, we can show that someone is happy or sad or angry or worried, and all of that emotion needs to be conveyed and sort of set whatever tone you're going for. But it all starts with the eyes. All right, so let's get started. All right, so these were the eyes that we drew last time, that we added the shadows and highlights for, and that we sketched the time before that. And their expression is neutral, right? Like it's not necessarily happy, it's not sad, it's not angry. It's just kind of neutral, which isn't a bad expression to have. Certainly not conveying a lot of emotion with it, though. So if I wanted to add a lot of emotion, I would need to adjust that. Now, I've done a few drawings here, and they're going to look really rough, so I apologize in advance. I didn't add the whites of the eyes. I was just trying to roughly get an idea of what the expression would be doing. So this is shocked. You can look at this and you can see that this particular figure is surprised in some way. They're shocked, they're startled, maybe a little bit more than startled, right? So what's happening? We have this almost circular shape, and you still have the spot for the pink fleshy thing, but it's almost a circular shape with the eye, and you can see all the way around the iris. He's startled enough that you can see all the way around. The eyelid isn't blocking the top or the bottom, and his eyebrows are pulling his eyes up. So anytime there's different facial expressions happening, the muscles around our eyes are doing different things. And in this case, what's happening is everything's being pulled up. It's being pulled up on both sides, and that's what's causing the eyelid to come up and us to be able to see all the way around the eye. Is we have this moment where we're shocked, our eyebrows sort of shoot up and the muscles pull up, and you can see all the way around the eye. Now, depending on how shocked you want it, you don't have to have it this extreme. It can be less than this. I was kind of exaggerating the drawings a bit so that it was easier to tell the emotion. But so it can be closer, but if you are drawing a neutral expression and you do happen to draw almost all the way around the iris, that expression will turn and will kind of look surprised, mildly surprised. So it may not be the look you're going for. So remember, with that neutral expression, we have only this part of the circle coming around, and then it's cut off. So you wouldn't, if you were surprised, you can see more of that. Instead of cutting it off, here, we can see all the way up. So that's a significant way around it. So that's kind of how you would depict surprise. And when I'm doing that with the iris, because the eyelid isn't casting the same shadow, more of this is in highlight, right? So we have a little bit more coming up, even up over being in highlight. And then we're going to hit the shadow over here, down into this section. But more of the top will be in highlight because the eyelid is now so far above the eye, we don't have that shadow that's casting down on it. All right. So then we have angry, and again, I was exaggerating the look for angry. So what's happening here, right? So when we're angry, our eyes are pushing, or the muscles in our eyes are pulling this way, and then they're kind of bunching up here. So we have this pulling down that's happening and a pushing in. And so you're going to have a lot of like wrinkles that happen up by your face, including in between your eyes. You're going to have a nice big one there. You're going to have all these little wrinkles that pop up because the muscles are contracting right in the middle and pulling your eyes to the middle in between. Now there's different layers of angry, right? Like in this particular example, I have his eyebrow coming up like this, but it's not always that high or obvious. Sometimes you're much more squinty than that. Sometimes everything's pushing down, and while you're certainly angry here, it's pushing down, which would cause the upper part of the eye to also be narrow. And in that case, you're still going to look angry. It's just a different version of that expression, right? So I wonder if I can really show that. If we were to really block that off. You would have this sort of angry expression as well. It's sort of narrowing the eye where you wouldn't be able to see above or below it. And that's certainly a way to express anger as well. In this particular one, though, it's to the point where someone is probably screaming or they're so angry that this part's kind of raising up while this is pushing down, which does happen. This is certainly a way to show anger. And what's happening in this particular case is our eyelid is not touching the top part of the iris. So the bottom part of the iris is still cut off because when we're angry, our eyes do become a little squintier. It's just in this case, he's so angry that the top is pulling up instead of pushing all the way down. And so the bottom part of the iris definitively cut off, maybe a little higher than that neutral expression. So you wouldn't go as far down because the bottom part of your eye here is going to come up. And again, this could come down, but we're not doing that. This time we're showing it a little differently where this is coming up so you can see all the way around. Because you can see the top, again, the eyelid isn't casting that shadow on the iris, allowing this to be more in highlight, and then the shadow to kind of kick in over here. But because the eyelid on the bottom is covering more, you're going to have that transition as it comes down a little quicker. And the wrinkles too. The wrinkles are going to also help sell that this is someone who's angry. You have these wrinkles that are causing the face to squint up. Because the muscles are all pushing together, it's going to create that effect, right? We end up with someone who just looks absolutely enraged at something we have done. All right, so then we have sad. With sad, your eyes are pushing in the middle again, but instead of pushing down like they were for angry, they're going to be pushing up because your eyebrow is raising up here, but as it's doing, it's raising up and sort of squinting together. So you're still going to end up with these wrinkles on your face as a result. And your eyes, because of how your eyebrow is pushing up here, but then drooping down as it comes, there's a narrower section here between your eyebrow and your eyelid. And in fact, the eyelid is kind of droopy with it, right? Like it almost droops backwards because you have this pressure down happening here while you have this pressure up happening here. And the combination of the two creates that sort of sad effect. You can see, you can't see the top of the iris. So once again, that's now cut off because our eyes are pushing down. You may be able to see the bottom. You may not. It's more, the bottom will be much more of a neutral expression here because the muscles that are happening aren't necessarily narrowing our eyes. They're affecting the top of our eyes. So that's really where you're going to see the change there from neutral to sad. So much as the bottom won't really change that much. In fact, I think I have a little extra space than what you would usually have. This should probably be a little narrower, and it's still going to give that effect, right? Because that's how that would be. I was a little overeager, making this a little expressively sad. But you can see even when I've done that, which is much more of a neutral line there, it still looks sad because it's the bottom part of your eye you would draw as if you were drawing a neutral expression. When you're sad, it's the top that you would manipulate a little differently. Now again, we have the eyelid now covering the iris again, so the top part of this iris now is in shadow, and we have the highlight kicking in down in here and across the bottom before we have the shadow that kicks in over here. All right. And then we have happy. So happy, your eyes fully engage again, so it's not like the neutral expression like we were just doing. Your eyes become squinty. So the top and the bottom of the iris are cut off a little bit more than if it were neutral. And then you're going to have, right, so we have this narrow expression here. And then we're going to have these wrinkles kind of pulling and pushing along our eye here, but it'll be in highlight. So without these wrinkles, it won't necessarily look like we're smiling. And now you don't have to do as many as I did, right? So you can I found sometimes just doing these two, having two wrinkles coming off the back of the eye, can be enough to indicate to someone that they're smiling without adding a little extra. But reality is that all of these muscles are engaged right through here. And so there is going to be wrinkling right along that back side as your eyes are kind of pulling up and tugging at it. And then all of this is pushing in. So this is pushing down, this is pushing up. Your eyes are squinty, and you have that tugging happening. That sort of makes this a nice narrow gap that gives us the indication that you're happy. Not much is happening with the eyebrows. They're still kind of in position because when you're happy, you're not really changing drastically that expression. What's happening is the shift in your eyes. And again, you would see less of the iris, so your eyes are narrower here than if there was a neutral expression. And once again, because we have the eyelid coming down, we have the shadow that's casting along that eyelid. So you have the highlight that's a little lower, and then it comes into shadow on that far side. All right. So then I've also thought it might be helpful to include some of the animals I've done to kind of show different expressions with them. So this is a capybara, and he looks annoyed. I mean, he doesn't look flat out angry. He looks kind of annoyed that we're there. And some of that is he's got kind of that squinty anger about him, right? Like he has his eye that comes up and kind of squints in this direction, right? So we have this, it's not full out rage, but it's definitely cutting off the top of his eye, and it's pushing down in a gruff kind of look where it's coming down and then back up. That usually is how sort of a line that indicates anger to us. So he has that, and then the bottom part of his eye is very close to his iris, so it doesn't leave any room there, so it gives the impression that his eyes are squinting a little bit more. But it's rounded enough that it doesn't appear like he's flat out angry and his eyes are narrow, just that he's kind of annoyed. Doesn't really want us to be there. We've interrupted him. He was having a grand old time. But you can see there's a shadow along here on the iris itself. We have the highlight hitting here, and then we have all of this in highlight as it sort of circles around, as the light would catch it. And then we have a lion. So this lion is angry. His eyes appear like he's narrowed out. He has that swoop, that like upward to this little swoop that comes high to low to this flick back up. Kind of has that going on both sides. He has a ton of wrinkles happening here all around his face, in different directions because of how his face is squinting in. We have very clearly the top part of his eye is cut off by his eyelid. So we know his eye's pushing down like he's mad, although we can see the bottom just like we could in that other example down below. This is almost the lion equivalent of the earlier one I had before, right? And so he just looks angry and like we're about to get eaten. And because the highlight and the shadows are following the swoop of his eyelid, you have that extreme kind of line doing the same thing on his eyes where it's sort of following that down and sort of giving that impression that he's angry. And then with the caracal, he's not, it's not angry, it's not necessarily smiling, but it's eager, I would say is the expression here, right? So we can't see the full top of his eye. That's important, otherwise it would look surprised, and we don't want him to look surprised. It's not the expression we're going for. But we can kind of almost see it as it comes around. We started to swoop it before we cut it off. We have this nice big swoop as it comes up and over. We can see the bottom of his iris, but not fully. It's very close. It has their eye shapes are a little different, so it lends itself differently to what we're doing. And then you have this sort of black section back here that makes it seem like his eyes are a little bit more potentially squinty when they're not. So this is somewhat of the anatomy of a caracal, and different animals that I draw will lend itself to looking happier or angrier or whatever it is, but you can still influence the emotion you want to have there. And then you can see before it gets all the way up into this dark section, I've tapered it off, so you have this shadow that's kind of coming along here, and then, of course, along that backside where the highlight is hitting through here, and that really strong highlight that's catching the light that's right here. But eager, it's not, I can't see fully around it, because if I finish this out, he would look surprised. And that's not the effect we're going for. So instead, I made sure to cut the color before it got to that point, because sometimes even if it goes a little further, it may be visually enough for us to look at it and be like, oh, he's surprised. And so I'm right on an edge there of looking surprised because I have started filling in the rest of this iris and pupil. I've started bringing this around, and I didn't finish that, which allowed him to look eager but not surprised. And the last one we're going to look at is this coyote who kind of looks like he's given us a little bit of a smile. It's not a big smile, but he's certainly happy. It's kind of how he looks. And that's because we have, some of that is again the shape of his eye, right? Like we have this angle that comes up, and then the natural shape of his eye takes us to this point. And that's going to indicate to us that he's happy. He doesn't look startled because the top of his iris isn't, we can't see it. The bottom is also cut off just a little bit. Looks like he wants to round that further down. So he doesn't look, surprised. He certainly doesn't look angry because he doesn't have that, his eyes aren't kind of coming down this way. He doesn't look sad because his eyes aren't sort of drooping out that way. He's got instead this nice rounded section forward that goes to a point behind. All right, so that's how you add emotion to eyes. I really encourage you to sort of, look in a mirror and make different facial expressions, or even Google it and kind of pay attention to what's happening, because it's all the different muscles around our eyes, right? So either we're like shocked, or we're mad, or we're happy, and that's causing different muscles to do different things all around our eyes, and that's what's causing that sort of manipulation to happen, and how we're going to read it as being happy or angry or worried or sad or, whatever it is, or annoyed. And so, I really encourage you to sort of take a look and see what your eyes are doing, and that's going to help sort of figure out how to add emotion to whatever drawing you're doing. Because people do connect with emotion. Now, I have mentioned before that in my drawing, sometimes I leave a neutral expression, and it certainly works. But if you want someone to have an emotional connection, they're going to be drawn more to something that they can look at and say, oh, look, that's happy. That makes me feel good. I want that thing, or whatever it is. They're having that emotional response to something you've drawn. But it all starts with the eyes. Your eyes show so much emotion, and if we can get the emotion of the eyes right, you can make a piece look amazing. So. All right, thank you so much. If you did like this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all next Thursday.